Hari Om. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste friends. Welcome to session 147 of Bhagavad Gita verse by verse. In today's class, we will continue our study of Mundakopanishad, the mantras from third Mundaka. Srimati Padma Chandrasekhar is going to chant Shiva Shadakshara mantra later at the end of the class. Now I request Dr. Hegde sir to give an introduction to the day's class before we begin the recap. Over to you, sir.
Hari Om. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. A deep sense of gratefulness to all our acharyas and to Guru as we come to the conclusion of our 2-year Bhagavad Gita verse by verse program. At the end of each chapter, we have interspersed some other topics, some other prakarana granthas that included Shri Dakshinamurti Stotra, Manisha Panchakam, Upadesha Sara, and somewhere around the 8th chapter onwards, we started the study of the Mundakopanishad. And today, by chance, we see that the Mundakopanishad is also coming to a conclusion in today's class. At that time, we introduced that we are entering into the world of the Upanishad. And as Osho said, we are entering into one of the most enchanting and the most mysterious. And the Upanishads are the highest as far as spiritual quest is concerned. He says that never before and never after has human consciousness attained to such Himalayan heights. The Upanishads, the word Upanishad is the synonyms for Upanishad are Vedanta. Vedanta means the end portion of the Vedas. The other word which is equivalent to Upanishad is Jnana, which deals with knowledge that removes our self-ignorance. Similar words are Atma Vidya and Brahma Vidya, all mean the Upanishads itself. The Upanishads are part of the Vedas, and the Vedas are also called the Shrutis. Shrutis means because before the script came into being, it was transmitted by Karna Parampara. That is through the Shabda, through what is being heard. And therefore, it is also called as Shrutis. The Shrutis can be divided, or the Vedas can be divided broadly into the Veda Purva, which deals with all forms of religious activities, primarily to fulfill our Purusharthas like Dharma, Artha, and Kama. And the philosophical portion of the Vedas, that is the Vedanta or the Upanishads, which deals with Parama Purushartha or Moksha. To recap the meaning of the word Upanishad, there are many derivations. We will take 2 of them. Upa means Samipe, going close to a Guru. Ni means to sit at one level lower than the level of the Guru. Shad means to destruction of our sense of Jivatvam. Jivatvam means I am a limited person, and therefore I have all forms of limitations or samsara. This is primarily because of our ignorance. The Upanishad also means something very close. And what is very close? None other than our true nature or Atma. Ni means Nischaya Jnanam. This knowledge should be doubt-free. And Shad means the one who takes you or one who gets that knowledge to you. The Upanishads have been classified as major and minor, depending on whether they have been commented by the great acharyas like Adi Shankaracharya, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, and so on. It is said there were more than 1,000 Upanishads, of which about 108 are available. 10 of these have been commented by the great acharyas, and these 10 are those who give us the essence of all that we need, and they are also discussed in the Brahma Sutras. You will see how they are divided. These are the list of these various Upanishads. I have included one of them, minor Upanishad, which we have also studied. When there are so many Upanishads, how many should we study? Bhagavan Ramana had a very quick answer. To see yourself, how many mirrors do you need? One Upanishad, this Upanishad that we have studied, this Mundaka Upanishad alone can help us to move symbolically from the lower bird to the higher bird. And this is very nicely said in another Upanishad, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which is something that we need to learn, and we will learn in due course. This verse, Atmanam Ched Vijaniyat Ayam Asmiti Purusha Kim Nichan Kasya Kamaya Shariram Anuswam Jwaret. This has been elaborated by over 300, up to 300 verses by Vidyaranya Swami in the Panchadashi volume 7, where it is said that once the Purusha, once all of us know our true nature as Atma, then you attain to Purnatvam, then you attain to complete fulfillment, and that is the purpose of all the Upanishads. The purpose of all the Upanishads is not something posthumous. It is while you are alive, while we are in this body, and this body has all its limitations. Can we experience total freedom while we are in the body? And you will see this freedom is not physical, to some extent mental, and largely intellectual, because now I know, now I am convinced about my true nature. The body will have its requirements, the mind may have certain amount of requirements, but I will never, I may go through all the challenges in life, I may go through all the ups and downs, but then have no unhealthy responses. And this is what is called a Jivan. That is the objective. Why are we studying these Upanishads? Why are we studying the source book of the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads? Primarily to explain to Jivan Mukta. That means I have complete freedom. No situation, the presence or absence of any object in the world, the presence or absence of any person in the world does not affect us emotionally. Why? Because we have Purnatvam. I now know my true nature is Satchid Ananda, and therefore, although my body is limited, although my mind is limited, I am Purnamada Purnamida. And then I have an emotional stability to be able to handle all the ups and downs in life. This is the definition of a Jivan Mukta. What happens once a person dies? Normally, what happens to a person who has not attained to spiritual wisdom, the body decays and merges into the 5 elements. The subtle body, the causal body, and the Atma will survive. They acquire another body and the person attains to Punarjanma. And so this Punarjanma is based on the amount of karma that fructifies, and that is the prarabdha for the next Janma or the rebirth. But let us see what is Videha Mukti. Now, Videha Mukti, today's all the verses in today's class will be discussing these two topics. What is Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti? Videha, that means what happens once this body is dropped. Once a person has got spiritual wisdom, what happens after death is a different story altogether. For a Jnani, all the 3 bodies merge into the Samashti. The Shariratrayam will merge into the Prapancha Trayam. The Jnani survives not as a Jiva, but now survives as Parama Atma. There is a total, there is a, it's like the all space has now merged with the total space. So there is no question of Punarjanma because there is no karma. Jnanam destroys the entire Sanchita karma. All the past accumulated karmas are destroyed. Because of Jnanam, the person has no sense of an ego, and therefore there is no future agami karma. And the prarabdha is closed at the moment a person dies, and therefore a person attains to Videha Mukti. Now, this background is required to study these verses, and the opening verse I will explain goes like this. Samprap enam rishayo jnana triptaha pratatmano vitaraga prashantaha te sarvagam sarvataha prapya dira yuktatmanaha sarvam eva vishanti. So this is verse 5 of the concluding khanda of the Mundakopanishad. So let us get the word-to-word meaning of each word. Samprapya enam, having attained to the highest, to the Brahman. Such a person, here the enlightened person is referred to as Rishayaha. Jnana Tripta, the person becomes completely tripti. Tripti means fully saturated with knowledge. Kritatmana, a person becomes purna, he becomes full. Vitaraga, free from all forms of attachment. Prashanta is totally tranquil. Sarvataha prapya, having totally attained what? Sarvagam, this all-pervading Brahman. Te yuktatmana, yuktatmana, these self-disciplined persons, also called Dhira or wise persons, avishanti, they enter sarvam eva, they enter into everything. Let us see how this is properly explained. Now we have got the word-to-word meaning. Now the elaboration of this verse, if you can see, there are two lines. The first line refers to the attainment of the Jnani, refers to the Jnani, and the second line refers to the palam, or the benefit of becoming enlightened. Having attained to this Brahman, the sage becomes these three things. Tripta, I've already described what Tripta is. That is why this Atmanam Che Vijaniyat, that, as I said, which is elaborated into 300 odd verses, comes as Tripti Deepa. The highest fulfillment is the fulfillment of Purnatva. Kritatmana. Again, a similar word, the mind is attains to a fulfillment. Vitaraga, no attachment, no strong attachments whatsoever. And Prashanta. And having attained to this all-pervasive Brahman, those self-disciplined wise persons now pervade everything, and they realize they are not separate from Brahman. So the first half of the mantra describes the Jnani, the second half describes the benefit of all his sadhanas. He merges into Brahman while alive, and therefore he is a Jivan Muktaha, and after death he attains to Videha Mukti. Is there a difference between Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti? For a Jnani, the presence or absence of the body has now made no difference whatsoever. To others, it looks like, a person now attains to Videha Mukti, because the moment a person attains to Jivan Mukti, he now realizes that he is one with Brahman, with the body or without the body. The presence or the absence of the body doesn't seem to make any limitations whatsoever for a Jnani. So the Upanishad says the person attains to Brahman in totality, and you will see all the verses today talk about the same thing. And such a death is called Paranta Kali, a person who has this Vedanta Vijnana Sunishti. Once his Vedantic wisdom is very clear, such a person has a final death because there is no more birth. Such a person attains to Brahman, just like a river merges into the ocean, the Jivatma merges into the Paramatma. In the end of the 15th chapter, Sri Krishna describes it this as Iti Guhyatamam Shastram Idam Uttam Mayanaga Etad Buddhva Buddhiman Syat Krita Kritasya Bharata. Once a person has attained to spiritual wisdom, such a person attains to complete fulfillment. The next verse will be explained by Ramaji, and because I don't want to come in between each speaker, so that we have 7 speakers today, so that we will use our time better. Ramaji, please.
Hari Om, Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha, Mundaka Upanishad, Mantra 3.2.6. And the mantra says, Vedanta Vijnana Sunishchitarthaha Sannyasa Yoga Yataya Shuddha Sattvaha Te Brahma Lokeshu Paranta Kale Paramruta Parimujjanti Sarve. This mantra is chanted generally along with Na Karmana Na Prajaya mantra to welcome a sannyasi or a scholar offering Purna Kumbha. It occurs in Narayana Upanishad and Kaivalya Upanishad also. The first half of this mantra describes a Jnani, and the second half, Jnana Phalam, in the form of Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti. The sannyasis who have realized that they attain immortality of life while living are called Jivan Muktas. It is indicated by the word Paramrutaha. their body falls once the prarabdha karma is exhausted and is termed as Videha Mukti, Videha Mukti, indicated by the word Parimuchanti. This mantra presents the stages of spiritual progress clearly. A few spiritual sadhanas are mentioned in this mantra, as you see in the next slide. Shuddha Sattvaha denotes the pure mind. Here, Sattva refers to the mind and not Sattva Guna. Scriptures and traditional acharyas give the route map of spiritual sadhanas. They prescribe sannyasa yoga as a sadhanam for purifying the mind required for gnana yogyata. Thereafter, gain gnanam and be free. Purified mind helps to dilute raga dveshas also. The awareness that Brahman alone is a source of permanent peace, security, and happiness is nitya anitya vastu vivekaha. Such a purified mind is called Shuddha Sattvaha. Puja Swami Paramarthanandaji describes 3 steps to neutralize raga dveshas, that is, refinement of raga dvesha, disempowerment of raga dvesha, and disarmament of raga dveshas. Sannyasa yoga is the next sadhana given. Sannyasa yoga is establishing in the consciousness of Brahman, consequent upon the renunciation of desires and all actions. There should be total internal and external renunciation. Vedanta Vijnana Sunishchitarthaha, developing Brahmanishta as a result of Jnanam. Brahma Satyam Jaganmithya Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha is the central idea of Vedanta Shastra. They have comprehended this true import of this knowledge. This knowledge has become a conviction bereft of doubts through Vedanta Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. Contemplating upon Jiva Jagat Ishvara with the awareness of Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka, a seeker becomes a Brahmanishta and is established in Brahman. This is the culmination of spiritual sadhana. This should be achieved without efforts. Now in the next slide, we see the sadhakas and moksha. Here, yatayaha means sannyasis. But in this sloka, it means prayatna shilaha. That means seekers who put forth effort in the right direction, dedicated to graduate from karma yoga, upasana yoga to jnana yoga. Paramrutaha means jivan muktas. With jnana nishtha, the seeker gets jivan mukti. Parantakala is termed as their atyantika marana, the ultimate end of all 3 bodies, namely gross, subtle, and causal bodies. The Jivan Mukta does not see himself in his body only, but in all bodies simultaneously. Brahma Lokeshu means consciousness of Brahman and not Brahma Loka as Chaturmukha Brahmas. Te sarve parimuchyante. They gain Videha Mukti by total merger into Brahman. Living as Jivan Muktas, after death, they totally merge into Brahman like a broken pot space merging into the limitless greater space. In both cases, the final realization that they are already Brahman is the same. A Gnani does not become free, but realizes that he always was and he always will be free. Acharya says, liberation is not freedom from sorrows. It is the realization that in the midst of sorrows, I am free. Only an Upanishad can assert such a state of being. We see this in Mundaka Upanishad, mantra 2.2.8, which says, Bhidyate Hrudaya Grantihi. The knots of the heart mentioned here are Brahma Granthi, Rudra Granthi, and Vishnu Granthi, in the form of avidya, kama, and karma. Ignorance called jiva bhava, which creates the doubt. That makes me think I am a karta and a bhokta. Suffering due to this is erased. All desires and doubts dispelled. All karmas, namely sanchita, agami, and prarabdha perish when the Supreme Being beheld. Hari Om. Thank you. Shri Gurubhyo Namah.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Today I'll be speaking about Mundaka Upanishad, Part 3, Chapter 2 and Verse 7. Mantra 7. Let's repeat the mantra. Gatha Kala Panchadasha Pratishtaha Devascha Sarve Pratidevatasu Karmani Vijnanamayascha Atma Pare Vyaye Sarva Ekhi Bhavanti. In this verse, Acharya Angiras talks about Jnanaphalam, that is, the benefit of knowledge. While living, the Jnani enjoys the benefit of Jivan Mukti. And at the end of Prarabdha, when a Jnani dies, he attains Videha Mukti. This phenomenon of Videha Mukti is explained in this verse. In the next 2 slides, we are going to learn what happens in the case of an Ajnani and then to move on to what happens in the case of a Jnani. In the case of an Ajnani, at the time of the death, only the physical body drops. The subtle body and the causal body, that all of the karmas along with the Chidabhasa or the reflected consciousness and the Chit, the original Atma, continue to exist. Of these various components, the Atma does not travel anywhere as it is all pervading in nature. But the other components together are called the traveling Jiva or the traveling soul. In the figure, you see on the left that only the physical body drops, whereas the rest of the components together form the traveling soul marked in red and move on. And according to the next fructifying karma onto the right of the table, the jiva takes another body. This is a normal course in the case of an ajnani. In the next slide, again we see that the chit or the atma does not move off because of its all-pervading nature and merges into the paramatma or the total. In the next slide, now coming to the case of a jnani. Next slide, please. In this mantra, what happens during Videha Mukti is clearly explained. In a case of the Gnani's death, we need to know that every Gnani is a mixture of material part called Anatma and the spiritual part called the Atma. The Anatma is again divided into 3 parts, that is the Sharira Trayam. Firstly, the Stula Shariram or the physical body or the gross body. Secondly, the Sukshma Shariram or the subtle body. And thirdly, the Karana Shariram or the causal body. And all this encloses the Atma part or the consciousness. The Upanishads say the Anatma will merge into the total Anatma. The Stula Shariram will merge into the Stula Prapancha or Virat, the Sukshma Shariram into the Sukshma Prapancha or Hiranyagarbha, and the Karana Shariram into the Antaryami. Thus, the Vyashti, the individual, merges into the Samashti or the total, and the individual consciousness merges into the total consciousness. Next slide, please. Here we have a picture which depicts the iceberg merging into the ocean with sunshine. The iceberg is formed out of the ocean and merges into the ocean. When does this happen? The powerful sunlight called Jnanam or Jnanasurya melts the iceberg of Sharira Trayam. Next slide, please. In Prashna Upanishad, the Anatma part is divided into 16 parts called Sodasha Kala Purusha. Of these 16, 15 merge into the corresponding total, Vyashti to Samashti, which is the one which remains and does not merge. That is called Nama, the name of the Jnani, which remains in the world. For example, when we take the big monks or the big leaders like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, because of the name which remains even after the Jnani is gone, his devotees and his Sishyas are able to worship their gurus even after they're gone for long. Next slide, please. Now going back, in Tattvabodha, we learned that the Sukshma Shariram has 17 different organs playing different roles. The 5 Panchakarmendriyas, the 5 Panchajnanendriyas, and the 5 Panchapranas with Buddhi and Manaha. Next slide. All of them function because of the blessing of the corresponding Devata, which is total or samashti. This total we call God. This Devata Amsha or Shakti is supposed to be in every organ. For example, in our eyes, the Surya Devata Shakti is present. Next slide. When a Jnani dies, these Devata Amshas go back to the Devata Samashti and permanently merge. In this slide on the left, you see that it is represented by the diagram. Whereas in an Ajnani on the right, the Amshas will go to another body and again seek the blessings from the Devatas. Why the cycle repeats? Because one has to understand the Vedas and gain self-knowledge. That is the primary purpose of life. A Jnani has done this. Hence, all karmas are dissolved into the samashti, especially sanchita karma, because prarabdha is exhausted and agami is avoided. Next slide. What happens to the atma component? The vijnanamaya atma, which refers to the jivatma, the ahankari atma, not the Satchidananda atma. That is the enclosed consciousness. It merges into the total Paramatma without any movement. To better understand, let's see this example. The pod space, which merges into the total space when the pod is destroyed. This entire process is called Videha Mukti, which gives us freedom from punarjanma. Thank you. Hari Om.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Mantra 8. Mundaka Upanishad, Tritiya Mundaka, Dvitiya Kanda, and we are seeing the 8th mantra. In this concluding part of Mundaka Upanishad, Acharya Angirasa is talking about the benefit of knowledge. While living, what's the benefit for a Jnani of this, knowing this knowledge? While living, the Jnani enjoys the benefit of being a Jivan Mukta. And when the Jnani dies, he attains Videha Mukti. And as Sir pointed out, it is in the context of others who see Jnani, but for the Jnani himself, he is always a Mukta. The differentiation between Jivan Mukta and Videha Mukta is for others in this world who see him and the difference. He is when he actually leaves, drops his body literally when he dies, then we call it as Videha Mukti. Here in this verse, an example of rivers merging into the ocean is taken to explain Videha Mukti. Rivers originate in the ocean, they exist because of ocean, and they eventually merge into ocean. Similarly, every Jivatma originates from Paramatma, merges back into Paramatma. Like all the rivers, as rivers flowing into the ocean lose themselves in ocean, casting off all the name and form, so the knower, the Jnani, freed from name and form, he attains the Parat Para, that is divine Purusha, who is higher than the high. Yatha Nadhya Syandhamana Samudre Astam Gacchati Nama Rupe Vihaya Tatha Vidvan Nama Rupa Dvimuktaha Parat Param Purusham Upaiti Divyam. This is the journey of a Jnani. But we have to remember, every Jivatma, why for that matter, anything physical, eventually will be striving and it will be struggling to expand itself to get towards Paramatma. Because when the Jivatma is struggling to get happiness, unknowingly or knowingly, it will be directed towards Paramatma, because Paramatma, according to Vedanta, is the only source of eternal happiness, Ananda. So this is the key thing. Whether they're aware or not, everything, including rivers, they are rushing towards, like they will be rushing, struggling, jumping, going up and down in the forest, without knowing its eventual destiny, which is the ocean. So knowingly or unknowingly, every Jivatma is going towards Paramatma. So this is the key here. So what happens for a Jnani is, there's a key here. When the river enters the ocean, actually there won't be any struggle. It's a silent merger. Similarly, when the Jnani enters into Paramatma, there won't be any kind of commotion, fear. It's so natural. So that's why this example is taken as an apt example of what happens during Videha Mukti. And what happens at this merger? Namarupe Vihaya. When river merges, water is not destroyed. It was always water. So we used to call it Kaveri, Ganga, Yamuna, Narmada. But once it enters the ocean, the river is no more called by its name. It's not any further called by its names. It becomes ocean. Water remains water. It won't go anywhere. It doesn't disappear. But with the merger, the Nama Rupa is dropped. Tatha Vidwan Nama Rupat Vimukta. Jiva Bhava goes away for the Jnani and he gets into Chaitanya, Parat Param. So here there is another thing which we have to remember is these two steps. Parat, the first para is Maya, and the second Parat Param is the Purusha, the Brahman. In the next slide, we see the key messages which the take home in this mantra, that is, whoever you are, whichever Jivatma, whether it's a child, whether it's a philosopher or a poet, like this great poet G.S. Shivarudrappa, who said, Karnada Kadalige Hambaliside Mana. When that mumukshatvam starts appearing, the philosophers get into that mode of finding that unseen ocean, which is the eventual destiny of everybody. Whether you are in that level of understanding or whether you are a child, you will be eventually running towards that happiness, as we see. And that's the first step, because that's the eternal source of happiness is Paramatma. And the second key message here is Parat Param. That's the two steps, which is the first step is first step of the Parat Param is the Maya. As we see the Lord through the window with our bodily senses, through the window of gunas or windows of Sat Chit Ananda, we see an aspect of the Lord. There's a name and form. As long as we see through these lenses, through these doors and windows. But once you actually enter inside the sanctum sanctorum, once you merge into that, you will see that Nirakara Brahman, where there is no name or form. So that is the second step. So before that, it is the Para. That is the Maya aspect of Parat. And the Parat Param is the Purusha, it's the Brahman. So where everything is dropped, get inside, go inside and lose yourself and merge into Brahman. So this is the gist of this mantra. Thank you. Hari Om.
Verse 9, Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. In this verse, entire Mundaka Upanishad teaching is sort of summarized. In this verse, Jnanam, Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti are all spoken. The essence of the verse is, knower of the Brahman becomes Brahman. Let me first recite the verse. Stayo havai tat param brahma veda brahmaiva bhavati na asya abrahmavit kule bhavati tarati shokam tarati papmanam guha grantipya vimuktaha amritaha bhavati. Meaning of the words, Sayo havai tat paramam Brahma Veda Brahmaiva Bhavati, meaning he who knows Supreme Brahman becomes Brahman alone. As you can see in the picture, the drop of the water merges into the ocean. Next slide, Doctor. Na asya abrahmavit kule bhavati. And someone who does not know Brahman he will not be in the family. Next slide, doctor. He is the odd man out. Tarati shokam, tarati papmanam. He goes beyond all grief. He crosses the tendency to sin. Guha granthabhyaha vimuktaha amritaha bhavati. He becomes free from knots of the heart. He becomes immortal. In the first two lines, Brahmaveda and Brahmabhavati are the two sets of words. The meaning of Brahmaveda and Brahmabhavati is the knower of the Brahman becomes Brahman. This is also called indirect Mahavakya. This can be called in a slightly different way as well. Jivatma, which is the knower of Paramatma, becomes Paramatma. How can Jivatma be the knower of Paramatma? This is possible only under one condition. What is that condition? The condition is the recognition that I am already Paramatma. And all these years, because of my ignorance, I had disowned my real nature. It is like Karna ignored the fact that he was Kaunteya, that is Kunti Putra, and accepted himself as a son of a charioteer. When Kunti told him that he is her son, he realized that he is a Kaunteya. Here, the emphasis is what happens when the ignorance is removed. So, through the knowledge, when you drop the ignorance, you become Brahmavid, Brahma Bhavati. The knower of the Brahman becomes Brahman. The third line, Na Asya Brahmavid Kule Bhavati. In this line, Upanishad glorifies the power of Jnani. All disciples or people around such a Jnani becomes Brahman by the power of the Jnani. Asya Kule Brahma with Na Bhavati, meaning Asya Kule means in his family. Alternative way of understanding this line is that someone who does not know Brahman will not be in the family or a company of a Jnani. That will be the power of Jnani's teachings. If he is a Grahastha, his spouse, children, family members are also influenced by this Jnani. This is the glorification of a Jnani. Okay, great. Jnani has achieved Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti by attaining the state of Aham Brahmasmi. But so what? What is the practical benefit? Because Jnani has to live even after attaining self-realization. This is mentioned in the fourth line of the verse. Tarati Shokam and Tarati Papmanam. Tarati Shokam means a Jnani crosses over all types of grief, mental disturbance and freedom from sorrow. Tarati Papmanam meaning the Jnani transcends all Papa Karmas. Here, Papa Karmas represent Sanchita Karma, which includes accumulated Punyam as well. There are two important things we must understand from this verse. One, Jnani enjoys spiritual peace, meaning I am Atma and I am ever free from all types of sorrows. Second, Jnani also need to attain mental peace by Aham Mama Raga Dvesha delusion. This is achieved through Sadhana Chatusthaya Sampatti, the fourfold salvation, which is Viveka, Vairagya, Shat Sampat, and Mumukshutva. All Tattva Bodha basics we have already seen. The last line, Guha Grantyobha Vimuktaha, meaning Jnani is free from all knots of heart. Here, knot of the heart meaning self-ignorance. So, when Jnani is Vimukta, which is free from all ignorance, Jnani after death becomes Amruto Bhavati, meaning he becomes immortal Brahman. Thank you. Hari Om. Hari Om.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. This is the penultimate verse of the Mundakopanishad, verse 3.2.10. Tadetad drichabhyuktam kriyavantah shrotriya brahmanishtaha swayam juhatva ekarshim shraddhayantah teshame vaitham brahma vidyam vadeta shirovratam vidhi vadaistu chirnam. The next slide we see Guru Angiras Rishi, here he is quoting the mantra from Rigveda to talk about the qualifications required for getting the full benefit from Vedantic study. If a sadhaka has these mentioned qualities, then he or she would certainly get 100% benefits from the Vedantic study. What are these qualifications or conditions? A Rig Veda mantra is quoted. Tadetad ruchabhyuktam. Tadetad, the following conditions for the Vedantic study, richa, through Rig mantra, abhiyuktam, have been mentioned. Now the conditions. Number 1, shrotriya. One should have the practice of scriptural study. Only through scriptural study, one will know that there is something called as moksha, there is something called as Brahman, and we are that Brahman. Without Shastras, we will be pure materialistic people, and we will be spinning around in the onslaught of the worldly changes with preoccupations with only Artha and Kama Purushartha, which is earning for 5 or 6 days and then spending in 1 or 2 days. The second condition is Kriyavantaha, means one should be a staunch karma yogi. That is, one should do the right actions with right attitude. The right actions are Pancha Mahayagna, that we have already seen before, and the right attitude is doing the actions as Ishvara Arpana Bhava and receiving any results with Ishvara Prasada Bhava. Karma Yoga gives mind or mental purity. In the next slide, we see the next condition. Swayam Juhatva Ekarshim Shraddhayantaha. Ekarshi is the ritualistic fire kindled by the followers of Atharvana Veda. Like Agnihotram, there are several fire associated rituals mentioned in the Karma Kanda. And this Karma Kanda portion is the Veda Purva portion. These rituals represent the Deva Yagna of the Pancha Mahayagna. Again, this is meant for mental purity. Doing these rituals, or for that matter, any puja, however simple it may be, with Shraddha, the sincere faith, is the most important thing. In the next slide, we see the next condition, which is Brahmanishta. Here, Brahmanishta means Saguna Brahma Upasaka. Those who meditate on Ekarupa and Vishwarupa Ishvara without the desire for the materialistic goals. So, Brahmanishta here is Nishkama Saguna Ishvara Upasaka. The next slide we see the Karma Yoga gives mental purity, Upasana Yoga gives mental tranquility. Through Karma Yoga, one can master Viveka, Vairagya, and Mukshatvam, and through Upasana Yoga, Shamadhi Shatka Sampatti can be conquered. So both Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga gives Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti, which is a prerequisite qualification to enter Jnana Yoga. Without this qualification, one can understand Vedanta, but the mental problems will also continue, meaning Vedanta will only remain at the information level, but not give the emotional strength or the transformation. In the next slide, we see Tesham Eva Brahma Vidyam Vadeta. So only for the qualified student with Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti, Brahma Vidya or Jnana Yoga, which is a self-knowledge, has to be taught. When someone doesn't get benefits from Vedanta, it is not the fault of Vedanta, but the fault lies in the individual, as the eligibility conditions are not fulfilled. Swamiji says that, therefore, Vedanta was taught only in the Gurukula in the olden days, only to the qualified students. It was never taught outside the Gurukulas, unlike these days. Swamiji says there is nothing wrong in learning outside Gurukulas, like these classes, for example, but one has to work on the Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti. In the next slide, we see the Shirovratam Vidhi Vadaistu Chirnam. Shirovratam, this is a vratam meant for all brahmacharis who follow Atharvana Veda. Here, a ritualistic pot with fire is carried on the head by a brahmachari who goes around completing that ritual. It is for this reason the Upanishad is called as Mundaka Upanishad. Mundaka means Shiraha. Because of the Mundaka Vratam, it is called Mundaka Upanishad. Swamiji says all these should not be taken literally, and everyone need not follow all rituals. These rituals are meant for Atharvana Veda people. According to one's designation, whatever scriptural instructions are given, one will have to follow within their own capacity. To put it simply, Without religious life, spirituality would not work. Swamiji says there is nothing called as secular Vedanta. Religious life is a stepping stone for the spiritual life. We will see the last verse of the Mundaka Upanishad by the next speaker. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha.
Hari Om, Guru Bhyo Namaha. We are reaching the end of what is called as one of the prototype Upanishad, because it follows the classical teaching like explanation of the teacher, the tradition, etc. And also it is beautifully known for examples such as a spider and web to explain about Brahman as the material and intelligent cause, and also two birds, Suparna, that is to explain that Brahman does not partake in any of our karmas and hence is unaffected, basically has no ego. And also, like an archer example, ultimately we have reached the target. Tadetat satyam rishir angiraha purvo vacho nai tat achirna vrato dhyate. Namaha parama rishebhyo namaha parama rishebhya. Tadetat satyam. That what you ask, that wonder, that truth is this here and this is it, not it is somewhere else and you go there and see and all that. That is what Upanishad promises and delivers here. Next slide, please. What is Etad? This Brahma Vidya. As we have learned beautifully explained by Divakar, Achir Navrata. This should not be learned by any person who has gone through the qualificatory steps as explained previously. That is not doing karma yoga and upasana yoga. And Acharya is again emphasizing Vrata na etad adhiyate. That is, do not teach this to unqualified people. To give an example, the teacher of the Rakshasas and Indra both goes to a guru for the Brahma Vidya, and he first gives that this body is Brahman. And this Rakshasa guru, he says yes and he disappears. He doesn't even say thank you. And then he teaches all the Rakshasas and we know what is the result. Whereas Indra gets doubt that how can this body which dies can be Brahman. And he goes to the guru next day and asks for a doubt to clarify. And then he explains further. Next slide, please. What is this Brahma Vidya? Tadetat Satyam means the ultimate truth. Ekasara Nitya Jagat Karanam Brahma. That is, it is the ultimate reality. It is not changed with time, space, etc. And whether there is everything, whether there is nothing, the easiness, the existence is there everywhere. When the drama is going on, when the stage is empty, the watcher is always there. Otherwise, there's no stage. So, the Shaunaka asks, Kasminnu Bhagavo, knower of the which Vidya, I will know everything. And this is that knowledge, Ekasara Vidya, that knowing Brahman, everything will be known. How is it? Next slide, please. Because as we know, Brahman is all pervading, like a single thread. The threads may have different colors, but ultimately the knot and the thread material is one. Ekasara. This is what we know. And this thread is running through you, me, and everything in the universe. Next slide, please. Tadetat Satyam, he has explained beautifully previously. Like a fire, the sparks in the fire which comes out of the fire but ultimately resolves into it. As Komal has told beautifully, like a waves which goes above the ocean but ultimately resolves into ocean. And ultimately, the water and ocean cannot be separated. However big the ocean is, it cannot claim that it is different from water. Similarly, the ultimate essence of you, me, and this world is Brahman, Brahman alone. Next slide, please. And this is available as everywhere, as the heat of the fire, which cannot be separated, as the sweetness of the sugar, as the vision in the eyes. We change from a small child to an old man, 50 plus, but everybody, I say it is me. Who is this me inside who says that is alone is Brahman? Next slide. And Tadetat Akshanam Brahma, previously it has been described that this is imperishable and it alone is there and was there. And this is the ultimate truth. Next slide. And this is the only thing you need to know. We started off with Ishvara, world, and me. Ultimately, Ishvara is in me, Aham Brahma Asmi. And the last Ishvara is everywhere.
Like this light, you can see through the prism as a multitude of colors, but ultimately there is only one light, that is the white light. And when we look at all the colors, we should know that behind that there is a white light. This is this Ekatma. And once you know this Brahman, that is all you need to know. Tameva Eka Janata. Next slide. And once we know, the Guru who has taught this is ultimate Guru, and that's why he is called as Namaha Parabhya Rishibhyaha. That means here he is saluting the entire Guru Shishya Parampara. Remember, this Mundaka Upanishad has come from Brahman, Brahmaji, and to us, and he is called as Parama Rishi, our teacher, because as beautifully explained by Vishwanath, Brahma Veda Brahmaiva Bhavati. Knower of the Brahman is the Brahman. There is no difference between them. It is not that somebody else do it, is some philosophical theory. The knower ultimately Nishta Gnana, that he is the one. And he stresses twice to stress the importance of the tradition and also to say that this Upanishad has concluded. Om Tat Sat. Thank you very much.
Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Shiva Shadakshara Stotram. Om Namah Shivaya. Omkaram Bindu Samyuktam Nityam Dhyayanti Yoginaha Kamadham Mokshadam Chaiva Omkaraya Namo Namaha. Namanti Rishayo Deva Namantya Apsara Samganaha Naranamanti Devesham Nakaraya Namo Namaha. Mahadevam Mahatmanam Mahadhyanam Parayanam Mahapapaharam Devam Makaraya Namo Namaha. Shivam Shantam Jagannatham Lokanugrahakarakam Shivamekapadam Nityam Shikaraya Namo Namaha. Vahanam Rishabho Yasya Vasuki Kanthabhushanam Vame Shaktidharam Devam Vakaraya Namo Namaha. Yatra yatra sthito deva sarvavyapi maheshwaraha yo guru sarvadevanam yakaraya namo namaha. Omkaram bindu samyuktam nityam dhyayanti yoginaha kamadham mokshadam chaiva omkaraya namo namaha. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Thank you, Padma, for a nice melodious chanting, and all the speakers for a wonderful class. Thank you, friends, for your active participation. On Monday, 15th May 23, let us log in for a session 59 of Disha for the discovery of inner strength and happiness at 6:45 p.m. In this episode of Disha, we'll continue our study of chapter 13, Kshetra Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yoga, for our study. With this, let us conclude today's session with our usual Shanti mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you.